Good evening, all council members, members of this committee and others, and our officers who are with us. Thank you for joining us for this meeting here on the 19th of April 2022 of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel. I'd like to welcome Joan as well. I know this lady's name because I know there's a lady called Joan who was going to attempt to get here this evening. Thank you for joining us. We hope you'll find that this is an interesting meeting and it covers the topic, if not completely, thoroughly enough for you to be able to have some of the information that you were looking for. Members, officers, we do have a bit of a technical glitch, so this meeting is not being live streamed. I understand it will be. It will be recorded and be available later, but it is not being live streamed for this evening. Excuse me, I'm sorry about the coughing. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate, excuse me, the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer, assemble in Hawley Square on the green, and officers will assist us and advise us when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are either turned to silent or in flight mode and they're not used for any purposes really while this meeting is in progress. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? I don't think so, so we can skip over the comments about filming and maintaining people's privacy. Are there any members who wish to speak under Rule 20.1? Thank you. Councillor Bailey. The budget monitoring report. Number 9, which is now number 5, is that right?
No, number 6.
Okay, which is now number 7. Yeah, okay. It's the coastal report. For those watching in black and white, the pink ball's behind the red one. Yeah, we've just the supplementary agenda item number 9 has been bumped up the agenda. It's now the new number 5, so everything else has been pushed down one. But it's the coastal review, Councillor Bailey. Yes, thank you very much. Any members of the public? Joan, did you want to have a word while you're here? You're just going to listen. All right, thank you very much. I hope you didn't mind me inviting you. Apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies? I think we're all here. Decorations of interest. Are there any decorations of interest members may wish to make? And now we turn then to the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a proposer, please, and a seconder to approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting on the 15th of March 2022? Thank you very much. Councillor Fellows and Councillor Moore. Sorry you're not going to be on camera, Councillor Bayford, but we get your best side, whichever way it is, because you're right in the middle there. So I now call upon Councillor Bob Bayford, who's come to make a presentation to us. He's the Cabinet portfolio holder. He's a member for Environmental Services and Special Projects. He's coming to talk to us about progress the Council is making with its climate emergency declaration. Councillor Bayford, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you, members, officers. Can I introduce Dr. Hannah Scott? For those of you that don't know her, she's the Climate Change Officer, and she's put this presentation together. So if it's rotten, it's her fault. If it's all right, it's all my work. So thank you very much. It's great to have this opportunity to come along and talk about what we're doing at the moment. After calling the climate emergency, a climate change officer group and a cross-party councillor working group was established. An initial climate change action plan was written, including both low carbon and biodiversity aims. It cut across many departments of the council, including housing, planning, air quality, facilities, the fleet, open spaces and the Thanet coastal project, amongst others. Looking at housing and planning, in the original action plan, the Housing Department aimed to create new energy efficient social housing with solar PV, and they've done this. With regards to planning, the department was tasked to write a local plan which included sustainability measures. They created and adopted the local plan, which includes energy efficiency stipulations to Sustainability Code Level 4 and also water regulations to address our drought-prone area. For example, the planning policy for developments in Thanet specifically state that houses must be designed to use less than 110 litres per person rather than the standard 125 litres. The planning department was able to add the extra stipulation because we are in a drought-prone area. They were also able to stipulate that all developments greater than 10 units must have EV charging points, which means that EV charging points will now be added as standard. With regards to biodiversity, they added a biodiversity net gain policy where developments must show that biodiversity is being improved and not lost. This scheme is now being improved to include 10% biodiversity net gain, and the mechanism of how this will work UK-wide is still being drawn up. Our fleet, though not electric, are the lowest emission vehicles possible for a diesel fleet, and the team reduced the distance of the routes travelled as much as possible to further reduce the emissions from diesel use. Over the past few years, the facilities team has installed LED lighting whenever the old lighting had run its course. The lighting is also on a movement sensor system which saves money and greenhouse gas emissions. They've also removed plastic cups from the offices and removed the coffee vending machine, encouraging staff to use their own coffee mugs and water bottles, which has worked well. Move on to paper use. Staff and councillors are getting used to Google Docs, some of us anyway, and working with documents on their computer screens instead of always printing them out. This is a saving on paper use first and foremost. However, it is also saving on the cost of printers and the cost of clicks. For example, in 2013 to 2017, the council rented 25 printers at £786 per printer. This cost the council £98,000 over 5 years. There is a click charge per print which came to £38,000 over 5 years. The cost of paper use in those years was £53,000. The total expenditure was £190,000 for the 5 years. From 2017, the council rented just 13 printers at £495 each. Paper use reduced to just £25,000 from £53,000, and the click charge was reduced to £16,000 from £38,000. That means that the total cost of printing and paper came to £76,000 as opposed to £190,000 for the previous 5 years. The graph shows that even before the pandemic, the use of paper and printing was reducing greatly as people were using Google Docs to work on documents instead of printing them out. Moving on, our communications team created a climate change communication plan and joined the KCC Climate Change Group for coordinated working. They've promoted the work of our officers over the past few years. For example, this climate change pledge produced by our climate change officer. This pledge shows how the carbon footprint of individuals is roughly split into the food we eat, the emissions from our home, the emissions from travelling, and the emissions from within everything we purchase. It then goes on to suggest some things that individuals can pledge to reduce their carbon footprint, such as eating less meat, reducing food waste, insulating your homes, walking or cycling or using public transport instead of driving where possible, reducing flying, reducing our spending on new items. Moving on to air quality and transport, Thanet's air quality now meets all the standards set by government, which means that it does not need to be designated an air quality management zone any longer. The inclusion of the EV charging points within new developments has been a great win for the team, as well as the installation of EV fast chargers at Birchington and Margate car parks. The local plan has included policies which encourage developments to reduce reliance on cars, for example by being situated within walking distance to train stations or bus routes, or with cycle paths included in their design. TDC employed a home energy officer who has set up a system where she can give advice to residents and landlords on home energy efficiency and also refer them on to relevant groups. People can contact her by emailing the address that's shown there, or by filling out a form on energy in the home pages on our website. She is also working hard to draw down large amounts of funding to retrofit insulation and other low carbon measures in housing within Thanet. She is also promoting the Solar Together scheme, which enables residents to purchase solar PV at a cheaper price. TDC employed a climate change officer with us tonight, who now advises the Climate Change Cabinet Advisory Group, as well as the Council, on government reports and the route to net zero. She also produces work such as Climate Change Pledge and gives talks to educate councillors, officers and members of the public on climate change. She's been calculating the carbon footprint of the council and working on a new net zero strategy and action plan. The first draft will be ready shortly. She will also write a tree and biodiversity strategy for Thanet. Moving on to tree projects, the Climate Change Officer has also gained funding to engage the public in tree planting activities. Working with the charity Trees for Cities, she's won funding for a community tree planting coordinator who will be with us until next March and who will run tree planting days with community groups and schools in Ramsgate. Ramsgate was chosen because the area met the criteria of the funding bid and because Margate had already had over 1,000 trees planted by ITWI in the past couple of years. These pictures show the first tree planting day, which was designated a Queen's Green Canopy event and attended by many TDC councillors and residents. The top right picture shows our new TDC Tree and Biodiversity Action Flag, which will be used at all tree and biodiversity events in the future. By the end of this, I'll probably be able to say biodiversity. Never know. Bottom left shows our open spaces team helping to plant the trees, and our new community tree coordinator, Anna Ritchie, watering the trees at the bottom right there. Moving on to George V Park, TDC worked with KCC on a sustainable drainage system in a small green in Westbrook. The works mean water is stored and filters slowly through the planting to remove any pollutants and help it drain through the ground. Before the upgrade, the water would have drained into the combined sewer network, which could be overwhelmed by heavy rain and add to local flooding. This project has not only improved the surface water drainage for Margate, but improved the overall aesthetics and biodiversity of the area, so much so that people now come and sit for a while to enjoy nature rather than just brushing through it as they did before. Since the calling of the climate emergency, the council has also employed a litter education officer. She's worked with schools to create a litter picking and recycling course for children, and she's run litter picking days and community activities. She also runs a sustainability forum for local groups interested in litter picking and other environmental action. Thanet Coast Project. With regards to biodiversity, the Thanet Coast Project kept going throughout the pandemic by taking their seashore safaris online. Greg, one of their volunteers, who is now a TDC Birdwise employee, created a series of films on the ecology of the coastline, and these were posted on our website. In 2021, they squeezed in 20 public events and 7 community events, engaging over 5,000 people. Thanet Coast Project volunteers also spent over 1,400 hours monitoring the coast and reporting any incidents in both years. The Biodiversity and Horticultural Officer created numerous wildflower patches across the island. These can be found at Tivoli Park, Margate, which is the largest of the wildflower meadows, stretching the width of the park, Lymington Road at Westgate, War Memorial Banks at Westgate, King Ethelbert School in Birchington, Ramsgate Cemetery in Ramsgate, Ramsgate Arts Primary School, Ramsgate, and St Lawrence Churchyard, Ramsgate. These have been beautiful to look at, as well as providing food for pollinators. Other areas for pollinators have been produced at Forness Point and Westbrook Undercliff in collaboration with the Bumblebee Trust in 2020. Moving on to the Birdwise project, since calling the climate emergency, we've employed a number of Birdwise officers to protect the birds along our coastline. Birdwise aims to ensure people can enjoy the coast without disturbing the birds that fly here from as far as the Arctic. So, we've done our bit, it's your bit now. Can you tell us what those birds are? Come on, So, top line, starting at the left. Any takers?
Canadian goose.
It's a Brent goose. How can you think that's a Canadian goose? It's clearly a Brent goose. Next along? No. Curlew. Next one? Dunlin. Next one, golden plover. Then the grey plover. And last on the top line, the lapwing. Bottom line, oyster catcher. Next one, purple sandpiper, redshank, ring plover, sanderlin, and my favourite, the turnstone. Yeah, turnstone, well done. Let's hear it for the turnstones. And that, members, is it. So any questions you've got, I'm sure Hannah will be able to answer. And if not, we'll make excuses and leave quietly. Thank you.
Councillor Bayford, thank you very much. It's very entertaining as well as being very informative. Members, over to you. Do you have any questions, comments you'd like to make? Yes, please, Councillor Keane.
Thank you. Yes, that was very interesting. A couple of questions. The first one was about the litter education officer. Now, at one time we used to have, I don't know if it was a dedicated role, but I just remember hearing a talk by them, someone that spoke about recycling in particular. Now, you did mention recycling in that, but what I think is that to encourage more people to recycle, people need to really know what they can recycle, because there's lots of myths that go around about, you know, everything gets chucked out because it's contaminated because someone's put in something. I mean, it may not be a myth, but what I'm saying is people don't know exactly what they can put in recycling and what they can't. So I wonder how much that is covered by this post, or if that post could be developed more to include more of that. And the second one was just about the electric vehicle charging. And yeah, it's great that we're bringing this into new developments. It's great we've got a couple of public points. Is there an actual plan to increase the number of electric vehicle charging points, you know, in public areas in Thanet? Thank you.
I might be able to delegate these questions to Gavin.
Yeah, I'll have a go. Yeah, you're right. In terms of, we did have about 4 or 5 years ago a waste and recycling education officer. Unfortunately, due to obviously financial constraints, we lost that post, and then we brought in the litter officer. So the litter officer does talk and does provide educational advice with regards to waste and recycling. I think from our point of view, it would be disappointing after the amount of work we've done that people still don't realise what they can put in the recycling containers, which ones. Yeah, and I think what we're always reiterating that message. We do have actually promotional panels on the side of the refuse trucks. You'd have seen the COVID message, and we're in the process of rolling out some new messages as well, which will also include recycling messages, because actually for us, those trucks visit every street in the district at least once a week. So actually the opportunity to see that message is significant. So we utilise that. In terms of the... Yeah.
Thank you. Because, yeah, I don't think it's confusion about what goes in what container. I think it's more the detail of it. This is something I heard, and you can tell me if it's true or not, but I heard that you shouldn't put post-it notes in recycling because of the very weak glue on them. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's that kind of thing that, you know, I just think it would be really good to clear up for people.
You can put it in your recycling because it goes through a process where it's cleaned anyway. Yeah. The electric vehicle, obviously we're working with the county because the county are the ones that predominantly get the funding. Also putting pressure on the government through relevant bodies as well in terms of that investment in the infrastructure. The government have made a significant commitment to getting everybody to electric cars by 2030, which is obviously not that far away, but we can't do that without the necessary infrastructure. And I know that there are lots of sort of charging points at some of the services, which is quite interesting actually, because I was at one of the services a couple of months ago and they were only Tesla charges. So unless you had a Tesla, you couldn't charge your vehicle, which seems a bit perverse. But we are working with the relevant organisations, and obviously when funding becomes available, we will put in the relevant charges in. And also, I think the issue is supporting local people and people who want to buy electrical vehicles, because I don't know whether you're aware, but you can't plug it into a normal. Well, you can plug it into a normal electric socket. It just takes up to 14 hours to charge your vehicle. But I know some of the manufacturers are offering with the package of the car to install a proper fast charging unit as well. So it's something for us to consider as we're looking for the smaller fleet for electrical vehicles, not the larger fleet at this moment in time, but it is something we'll be considering in the future. But we are looking at that option, even when we look at, we're doing the review of our estate as well. And when we review the state of the offices and the depots, we need to look at that infrastructure and that future proofing requirement as well.
Thanks. I've got three. The first one's for Gavin and follows on from the electric vehicles. We've had offers in the past of companies willing to install fast chargers for free. Are those sorts of things no longer available?
Yes, they are, and when they are available, we take up that offer. But there's always a catch.
What sort of a catch? I mean,
well, previously it's you're making the commitment, so they're asking for a further commitment as well. But I would say in terms of electric vehicles, because this isn't common knowledge yet, is we are trialling an electric refuse truck next month. So we've got a refuse truck coming for a week. And actually, what I've insisted is that we embed that into the service. So instead of it just doing peripheral work, it's actually going to be doing some of the garden waste collections, because actually garden waste collections are quite difficult because the bins are really heavy. So to really get an opportunity to really test the vehicle.
Brilliant, that's great. May I move on to my others, Chair? So my second one was about the new developments, when we give permission for new developments and access to public transport, because we know this has been a real problem in some areas. How much, maybe, I'm not sure if there's anybody here who's going to want to answer this one, but how much clout do we really have to say to a developer, we're sorry, but this isn't going to work in such and such a place because there's actually no access to public transport at all, and everybody who's there is going to be trapped unless they've got their own vehicle?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. There is no one here that can answer that fully. I mean, all I can say is that, through the revision of the local plan, I mean, we are reinforcing, green credentials, but, there are going to be logistical situations where we can't necessarily say, well, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. But we're certainly intending to make things as green as we possibly can. But I'll take that question back to the planners and get a written answer.
Thank you, that would be appreciated. And my last one was just following on from the, Hannah and I have just had correspondence about this, so it's just asking for a bit more detail. Following the sad loss of our tree and biodiversity officer, I understand we've got a consultant who's going to be working with planning for a while on tree matters. What's the longer term plan of that? Because obviously that was a crucial post in terms of protecting those trees when we were looking at new developments.
I'm happy to answer that. I mean, we were here to talk about what's happened so far. We're still reviewing the situation as far as the replacement of that officer is concerned. But crucially, the funding that was there for it will still be there and will be utilised in some way.
Thank you. Members, any more questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very, very informative. It was very sad to go down to Jackie Baker's where we planted that avenue of trees and there are two missing on the right hand side. Is that it? Is there money to replace those trees, or is that it? Thank you.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I think there's only one that we found has been vandalised, so we had to take that completely out. There are another 58 trees, but we've designated areas for that. But perhaps we could use one of them to go back into Jackie Baker's if that gap is really standing out like a sore thumb.
Such a shame because it looks really good until you
Yeah, it's a shame.
We can, from various members of Ramsgate Town Council, we can find the money to buy some more trees to replace broken ones and things if it's needed.
Lovely, thank you.
Can I just add a comment to say that that was really interesting, and I'm really impressed with the work that's going on. And I think, you know, congratulations on whoever had the foresight to think about employing Eve, because that work is going to be more and more important as prices go up and people are under more financial pressure. And I know she's doing a fabulous job. So thanks very much to everybody who's involved in that.
Thank you. Members, if there are no more comments, apart from for us, on behalf of all of us, for me to thank Councillor Bayford for that report, and Dr. Scott as well, thank you very much for your input this evening. It was indeed very, very interesting. I think it probably caught quite a few of us by surprise at just how much difference some of the things have made since efforts really began. Yes. Thank you very much. If you want to sneak off now for an early pizza, do please do that.
Good night, members.
Good night. Thank you very much. Do we have Gavin anymore? Excuse me. Okay. Dear, oh dear. Dear, oh dear. Excuse me. Yep. Something. As I hinted earlier on, agenda item number 9, the supplementary agenda, has now been moved up the agenda. So if I could ask members to refer to that item. It is, of course, the Winter Gardens lease call-in of an individual cabinet member's decision. I hope you'll just permit me for these extra couple of minutes of introduction for this call-in. It might be nice for all of us, and also I should welcome Councillor Lees. First time you've joined us this evening. Forgive me for not welcoming you earlier, but for all of us, but also for the recording, if we just run through the process of the main issues that were raised in your thinking, so that members thought, well, let us call this in and have it discussed. So I'm going to hand over to Councillor Huxley, please, who's going to introduce, it's, I believe, mostly at paragraph 2 in the report, members.
Thanks, Chair. This wasn't a decision taken lightly to call it in. We discussed it, the Labour members and Councillor Austin of the Green Party. So obviously the workings of the Review and Scrutiny Committee, it's in the name, isn't it? It's to scrutinise the workings of the Council and to have a very open and transparent process so that we know what's going on at the Council, so that we can tell residents, businesses in the area, why we're doing what we're doing, and also for us as councillors to, so for our own decision-making processes as well. So obviously, as it says in the report, item 2.2, so we called it in terms of item A, 2.3a, the presumption of favour of openness and transparency, like I was saying. And item F, the need to give reasons and explanations for the decision, which we didn't think the officers had done, or the cabinet member. So it's really in the report here. So probably sort of two main questions are, what are the additional costs your leisure will incur by this decision? Not just for TDC to take the lease back, but what other costs will be pile on top of that. And there was no attempt really to quantify what the cost would be, what the detail of it is. We were wondering whether it was something to do, what would your leisure use the money for? That wasn't specified. Was it, for example, for staff redundancies or supporting other parts of the your leisure business? So, and why should TDC give that money back to Your Leisure? Is it capital expenditure money? Is it revenue money? So really, what are the potential costs associated with an early surrender of the lease? And again, another issue is what is the future use of the Winter Gardens? So obviously other colleagues have got questions as well, so thanks.
Sure, but thank you very much, Councillor Huxley, for outlining why we've called it in to have a conversation. And I do know that Joan, the member of the public who's with us, is from a theatre background herself and has a good deal of experience in how theatres and so on work, so she has a particular interest in this subject. So thank you for outlining that for us. I'd like now to call upon either Chris or Matt to provide some background onto the decision, and of course Councillor Rees-Pugh as well.
Thank you, Chair. Matt's not here tonight, so I'm afraid you've got me instead. I know I've stealthily removed his name, Clark. No, he's not here. I've done a bit of a swap with him. I was explaining to Councillor Bayford earlier, Cabinet next week clashes with West Ham's first semi-final appearance in a European competition in my lifetime. So I shan't be here next week, and Matt is covering me. So here I am tonight. So
David Moyes.
Indeed. Okay, yeah, it is indeed, yeah. So getting back to matters at hand, please excuse my digressions. If I can take you back to January 2021, at that point in time we were in the midst of the third national lockdown, and obviously the leisure services in particular, the leisure sector had suffered significant sort of financial damage and strain as a result of COVID. Later in January that month, there was a report that was taken to Cabinet. Cabinet considered a number of recommendations that were taken to it about how we could help Your Leisure with their leisure services and the sustainability of their offer over the short term and into the medium term. Sort of main areas that were considered a part of that report were firstly, the impact of COVID on their operations and a need for a loan of between 700,000 to 1.5 million pounds. To date, nothing has been drawn down on that, so that was one of the items that was considered. The second point was actually most relevant to this decision, was to provide £230,000 worth of funding to the Winter Gardens to ensure it could reopen and operate from October 21. Which meant addressing the heating issues that were there, particularly replacing and relocating the boiler. And then thirdly, explore opportunities to refinance existing Your Leisure loans. They're actually more attributed to the leisure centres. Those discussions are ongoing with Lloyds, the bank, to see if we can get better rates. It's been quite a difficult and drawn-up process, but we're in a situation now where they're more interested in looking at refinancing those loans. And then fourthly, relevant to your question, Councillor Huxley, is around what the long-term sort of future were for the Theatre Royal and the Winter Gardens, and to look at removing Your Leisure from those arrangements. So it should also be noted in that report, when we're looking at the Winter Gardens, there were a couple of key things that were identified, sort of £3 to £4 million worth of long-term investment that was needed in the building at the Winter Gardens. For necessary repairs and improvements. And in addition to that, we kind of had on our radar at that point in time the bidding that we were going to be putting into the Towns Fund. It's now become the Margate Town Deal. So that's a bit of background. Where we are now and trying to answer some of these questions. So Your Leisure had a lease to run the Winter Gardens until October 2024. But in light of the sort of financial pressures that I mentioned, and also us receiving £300,000 as part of the Margate Town deal to look at for the future of the Winter Gardens, it was decided that it was the right thing to return the Winter Gardens to TDC in order for us to begin to sort of plan what the long-term future and vision for the venue would look like. In sort of normal circumstances, we would have taken this to a formal cabinet meeting and sort of addressed the needs for transparency that have rightly been sort of addressed by Councillor Huxley. But we needed to get a portfolio decision pushed through relatively quickly in order to allow Your Leisure to approve the decision to end the lease early at their board meeting on the 9th of March. Following these approvals, as such, the the venue will be returned to Thanet District Council hands and operations from the 14th of August this year. Turning to the sort of the costs that Your Leisure are going to bear, as part really it's because they are ending that lease early. So they've got staffing commitments. It's estimated in the region of £66,000 potentially for redundancy costs associated with staffing, and upwards of £73,000 of pension costs as well. In addition to that, outside of staffing costs, they were able to obtain about £17,000 worth of crowdfunding, which was to keep those venues open, and it's to be determined whether that funding will need to be returned to the donors. So once we sort of determined the best way to fund those potential costs, or at least underwrite them, was returning back to that boiler issue, because we'd identified £230,000 worth of funding that we could use to address the boiler issues for the venue to open October last year. But because we knew we were in a short-term scenario, we actually opted for a temporary fix to the boiler, and that came at a cost of £63,000, which leaves £167,000 of funding uncommitted. And these are revenue costs. Although the boiler works would have been capital, it was revenue funding that would have been made available for them to do the necessary works. The other thing that I just want to stress is this is the maximum amount of money that we are willing to provide Your Leisure to meet these costs. We will underwrite their costs up to that value. If they go in excess of that, they will bear those costs. But equally, if they are less than that, we will only fund them up to the cost that they will bear. So there will be a full open book accounting arrangement where they'll be required to provide any documentation, supporting evidence in order for us to verify the costs that they've incurred due to us ending the lease early. Thank you, Chair. Hopefully that's a sufficient introduction to the item.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pugh, did you have anything you wanted to add from a cabinet and portfolio holder point of view?
I did, Chair. Thank you. And just to add a bit more information, particularly, I'm not going to go into the technical side. I think Chris has definitely covered that. And good luck to West Ham for the night of the cabinet meeting. Up the hammers is all I can say. I think it's important to acknowledge that Chris and his team have worked incredibly hard, particularly in conjunction with Your Leisure, to get to this point. It's not an easy decision to make a cabinet member decision rather than bring it through the correct process. But as Chris has already said, because there was a board meeting for Your Leisure that was fast approaching, it was deemed necessary to make this the decision as it was. Doesn't mean that I don't welcome now coming to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to explain this. That's absolutely fine. I think it's important to acknowledge that we do have some funding available through the Margate Town deal, as Chris has already outlined, and there is separate funding for the Theatre Royal, because while I appreciate that the agenda item says the Winter Gardens lease, it's also the Theatre Royal that is returning back to TDC as well. So they're both being separated from the assets that we own that Your Leisure manage. And there's also funding available within the Margate Town deal for the Theatre Royal as well, which of course has its own set of challenges. But I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge that bookings were going to end or cease towards, I believe, the beginning of August, were they, Chris? For the Winter Gardens, for us to have plenty of time to be able to do this study and everything, to see what is best going forward for the Winter Gardens. So it made sense for us to now take hold of the lease rather than Your Leisure continue to hold the lease on a building that they can't use and that is empty and that they can't then advertise for events. So we want to be able to ensure that the Winter Gardens, as I've said before, is closed for the least amount of time so that we can understand and appreciate and finalise a long-term future for the Winter Gardens so that it can be up and running again as soon as possible. I think it's also worth noting as well, as Chris has said, that this is only as a result of the early surrender of the lease, and it will be capped at this level. And as Chris has already said, it will be signed off by him as Section 151 officer as well. So all of that will be, as always, completely above board. But yeah, Chair, happy to take anyone's questions, really.
Thank you very much. This is a really simple question for a simple guy like me. I'm imagining that the long-term future of the Winter Gardens would be affected by who actually held the lease. In other words, Thanet District Council couldn't have a major say in the development of the theatre if it was leased to someone else. So therefore, is it more advantageous to Thanet District Council to be able to oversee the redevelopment, the improvements, if we hold the lease rather than if it's held by someone else?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's a very good point. And I always wince when you say a simple question from a simple guy, because I think, as we all know, when you speak in council, it's never a simple sentence that comes out of your mouth, Chair, in all due respect. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. In short answer, yes, it does. I think that actually, as myself and our then Director of Property and our Director of Regen did an interview with, I think it was Kent Messenger a few months ago, because there were fears from local residents that, the Winter Gardens was just going to be sold and it was going to be turned into flats and all that kind of stuff. So we did that interview to kind of reassure residents that that wasn't the case. And I think what I would say is that by us now taking back the lease, as we already own the freehold, from a position, it certainly makes more sense, really, and we have much more of a say. And I think, in a sense as well, the community has more of a say, because it would always be difficult if we conduct this study and the suggestions or the recommendations move away from what Your Leisure have been running the Winter Gardens as particularly their business model. That would then be potentially quite difficult, really, to try and remedy between the two of them. And of course, although we've got £300,000 allocated for that study, it would then be a terrible waste if we're not then able to implement those recommendations because Your Leisure wanted to go in a different direction. So, I think this is the best outcome, and I would say that it is advantageous for us as a council.
Thank you. Councillor Huxley.
Thanks for that, for these clarifications. Just the question, why wasn't that in the report, all those things that I've asked and you've replied? I know there's a sort of time pressure, but, and also could, perhaps West Ham United could fund the renovation of the, as they've got lots of taxpayers' money and a cheap rent at their ground.
I couldn't possibly comment on the operation of the London Stadium. I think there was further information that was provided to Councillor Pugh when he was making the decision, but I think it's fair comment to say the decision notice that was published was limited in terms of the amount of information that was actually published, and that's fair comment. I take that on board and something we'll consider going forwards.
Chair.
It may be that actually, I can work in conjunction with Chris. We could probably put some of this information, Councillor Huxley, into a document for overview scrutiny members. I'm happy for this information to be shared. I'm sure Chris is as well, so that you've got it on paper, really, and something for you to be able to refer back to. Because I'm sure as the months go on and everything, and as the Winter Gardens does then take no bookings after August, I'm sure we'll all be receiving questions from residents. So I'm sure that's something that we're happy to work in conjunction and supply to committee members.
And keeping the public as informed as possible as it goes along through regular statements through the wave and so on. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There are some other councillors and members. It's ironical that we're not live streaming tonight because I'm aware that so many people are interested in this subject. I read the report thoroughly, and I thank Chris and Councillor Pugh for what they've stated tonight. It has been said, obviously we all know the Winter Gardens is a massive asset to Margate, as the Theatre Royal is. Also, and I didn't declare an interest, but I think most of you know my interest in those places over many, many years. And I say, Joe Public are watching us of what we do tonight. Your Leisure, I'm aware since they took over, and it was Thanet Leisure Force before that, they're not in a good position themselves anyway. I've followed those over the years, purely out of interest. That's what we're here for. But I think what's in front of us tonight makes sense. I've often said that, I can recall the days when summer seasons were in this town and Margate Borough Council, and you all know I'm that old to remember that sort of thing. They never made money except for one, and that was in 1968. And Chris would be interested in this. It was Danny LaRue. You can laugh. He was good. With Ronnie Corbett, the show ran for 18 weeks. And this will never happen again unless you do miracles, Chris. But Margate ratepayers were given money back on their rates because it did so well. I know that's a little bit off subject, but the report I think is good. It does make sense. To see your leisure go from these entertainment venues, and I know all about the sports things, and I don't attend those places, but it makes sense. The Thanet District Council shouldn't run theatres, but on this occasion, we've got to do something, and tonight, Joe Public are watching us, because they want answers, and thank you for your report.
Councillor Keane, then Councillor Rattigan, please.
Thank you. Well, my point echoes what Councillor Tomlinson has just said in terms of the public watching this decision very carefully. I think one of the things that worries people is that the building, which obviously does need a great deal of investment, will just go to rack and ruin as other places in Margate have, and then it will be lost because it's just beyond repair. And particularly if the boiler only had a temporary fix, I'm worried about it for the coming winter. So is there assurances that it will be maintained and we won't find it flooded out or something in the middle of winter? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. We'll obviously be doing our best to maintain the asset during the period of time that it's not operating, which we want, as Councillor Pugh said, to be for as limited a time as possible. That will largely involve officers going in for spot checks on a regular basis to make sure the roof's not got a hole in it and water's pouring through it, and the building is operating on a not operating, is in a reasonable state. But yeah, there are processes that will be put in place to make sure there are checks put on building while it's in that sort of vacant period.
I just wanted to add to that, Councillor Keane, that as Chris has said, that's always a priority for us, and no one wants to see a building as wonderful as the Winter Gardens decay and fall into the sea, God forbid. But there's certainly challenges with the building. I know that the entire building itself is listed, and that includes the extension at the back that I think was built in the 1970s, is included within that entire listing. So it's not just the old kind of heritage areas of the building that are listed, the entire thing is. So, we've got to try and maintain that as best we can, and that may be why Your Leisure has struggled, because it's a bit of a hodgepodge of certain things, and things have been added and then taken away and stuff like that. So it's certainly a priority for us, but I think that's why it's important that we get this study done as soon as possible. I think it's coming to Cabinet at the end of this month to release the funding, so that can start, or the process can start, because it's incredibly important we get that done as soon as possible so that we can then decide on a long-term future for the Winter Gardens and progress that forward, really. Because I think, as Chris already said in his response, we're looking at £3 to £4 million worth of refurbishment on the building alone. It needs a considerable amount of investment, and no one wants to see it, decay and go into ruin and go beyond repair, really. So I think that's why we're doing this now, because, I don't want to be coming back years from now, and saying, look, it's too late, we can't do anything. Because I think, residents will not only be angry, but councillors will be angry, and everyone that has fond memories of that building won't particularly accept that we've done all we could to make it the best it can be.
Just two short questions. First one, do we know any rough ideas of the timescale for the feasibility study? And secondly, obviously the building is going to be closed for a bit of time. Will there be any, obviously because of it being empty and it being in an area where people, teenagers that could break in, will there be any security covering that site?
So in response to your first question, the study itself, I'll seek an update from our Director of Regeneration. I'll get back to all committee members on that because I'm not aware of the timescales for that myself. On your second question, Councillor Rattigan, I think it's incredibly important that the building is left secure, and we know what kids can be like and everything. So that is a priority for us. So I'll certainly look into that with officers. It was certainly mooted a couple of weeks ago during discussions with officers about finding maybe a meanwhile use for the building so that it's not just locked up. Whether we can or not in the interim, we'll have to wait and see. But I know that there are, clubs locally that are looking for spaces to use and stuff like that. So if we can, I think that would be great, because it just means that, you have the kind of the watching eyes and everything, and it's not set vacant and then it's used as a place for teenagers to hide and, Yeah, so it just helps, and younger people will have less few places to hide in the dark and smoke without their parents or anyone seeing them. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks to both of you for your report. You have answered my questions really. Just the one for clarification. I've been asked why the Winter Gardens was being closed in August the 14th. When people consider that as sort of peak season. I think you did mention the reason, but could you just clarify that for me once again? Thank you.
Sure. My understanding is, but I will get this clarified, my understanding is so that we can commence with the work of the feasibility study and to really look at what the long-term future is of the venue. But I don't know. That was the reason to break the lease. I can't comment on exactly why the date was, but I will get a firm answer on that and come back to you. Unless, yeah.
So sorry, Councillor Curry. I'm going to move. I can come back and provide some clarity on that. So the date of that August was agreed in conjunction with your leisure quite a while ago, I believe over a year ago, to give them time to provide, because they have bookings that are booked up years in advance and everything like that. So it was agreed as a date to kind of, put down the marker, and that any events before that could be held but couldn't after, so that we could commence the feasibility study, because I think the priority was shared not just by officers but the cabinet at the time, and the decision makers, was that we wanted to give your leisure as much notice as possible and not potentially cut them off too soon, and then they'd miss out, local people would miss out on events, and tickets would be cancelled and events would be cancelled and stuff like that. So it was just to kind of provide enough of a buffer for the long-term planning to occur.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. So needs £3 to £4 million of the refurbishment, which could be 5 to 6 once you get going. What's the plans for that money? So that's obviously the opening and reopening is going to be based on when those funds are available.
So thank you, Councillor Fellows. We'll have to see what the feasibility study says, particularly for the recommendations for the long-term use of the building, because I think that may open up opportunities for us to seek a partner from the private sector to assist us in not only renovating the building but then potentially running it with an operator or something like that. I think that would then help. I don't think it's necessarily within the council's interest to fund the entire renovation on our own. I don't think it's what we do best. I don't think, as a council, we run theatres very well. That's just an opinion, really. Residents may want me to get up on stage and sing a Michael Bublé song, but I don't necessarily think they pay tickets for it. So, Councillor Tomlinson is agreeing as well. He certainly won't. So I think that's part of it. Really, is that we need to seek particularly a commercial partner that will maybe cover the costs or assist with some of the costs. And I think that's what's more important, is that we find a long-term operator for the building that will take it forward in the future.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for letting me come back. The dates which, if you can tell me to go away, the reason that date, the date that was set, and this comes from the manager, the week before is the sole weekend, which the Winter Gardens is used more now, and that takes a fortune. So, hence, as I understand it, that's why they're going to have a week to clear up, and that's why they're shutting then. Are you intending to board it up at all? That is a worry. And if I come just one other item, then I will shut up. I have said this at meetings before. The previous managing director had plans through English Heritage, or whatever it's called now, for the Winter Gardens when things weren't looking too good. This removed the roof off what's the Queen's Hall, which was the 60s that was put on. English Heritage were very, very interested in copping up some money because it was going to be brought back into its former glory. Now, we all know we've had COVID come in, we've got a change in management at the Winter Gardens, but those plans are in this building somewhere. And I think Gavin's heard me say this before, sorry Gavin, but start searching because they were brilliant. But boarding up is a worry because we've seen what happens when you board buildings up. Thank you. I'll keep quiet now, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tomlinson. I would never expect you to be quiet, particularly about Margate. I mean, it's a very good point. I mean, that's something that I'll have to check and get back to you and the rest of the committee. I don't think it's particularly of any interest to board it up. I think visually that sends the wrong message, really, particularly to the community. And I think, as I said, explained before, if we find a meanwhile use for the building, then it won't necessarily need to be boarded up, essentially. And I think that would be wonderful, because if it can have a temporary use and still be used, then that will mean that it won't necessitate that. Of course, it's important that we secure the building anyway. So that's something that we'll be working closely on, and I'm happy to make a priority. Going back to your question again about taking the roof off, was it the Queen's Hall? Was it?
The Queen's Hall used to be known as the Sun Lounge. That was an open space. That was like it when it was built, and that was before I was born in 1911. But as I say, it was brought back to as it was because the need of the Queen's Hall isn't what it used to be with all the big dinners and everything else. That's all changed. It was put there, cabaret nights and so on, but life and entertainment, as we all know, has been changed. So, yeah, it's take the roof off, but it's not, of course, as easy just to take the roof off.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say to that, Councillor Tomlinson, if there are plans, and if that has been muted before, then that may potentially come up in the feasibility study for a future use of it. I mean, part of that site to be kind of open air and stuff like that, and the concerts you could have and everything would be fantastic. So of course I'm sure that will come up in the study. But if you have any more information about that, please send that to me, because I'm more than happy to then facilitate that and see if that may be something that can be implemented into the study. Of course, I'm not the expert, so if the experts look at it and think it's not a good idea, then fine. But I'm more than happy to ensure that we put that on their radar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to ask, in this period of where it's not being used, have we liaised with other organisations outside, customers, whatever you want to call them, like the Fire Authority? The Winter Gardens is a special risk. I know that because I sit with my firefighter's hat on at the moment. And obviously it's an open space which causes problems for firefighting. If it's unoccupied, there's always a worry that people go in, rough sleepers, they break in, they do things. It might be advisable maybe to bring them on board just to up their PDA, their predetermined attendance, and just make them aware what's going on, because obviously we don't want to lose the Winter Gardens, but we would like to get in there quick if there was an issue. So that's just me speaking personally. I don't know if you've thought about that, but it might be advantageous. Thank you.
I mean, Councillor Moore, thank you for that. I think that's a great suggestion. I'm not aware of if we've had those discussions or not, although I can check with officers. But whether we have or not, I think that's a very important point. And that's definitely something that we can look into. So yeah, thank you.
If I could just add to that, not just for the Winter Gardens, but for all our vacant properties, there's certain conditions we have to meet or obligations of our insurers, because obviously this asset has a value to us, and we'll be liaising with our insurance as one of those sort of parties, as well as the other sort of bodies as well that you've mentioned are ones that we consider speaking to. But our insurers will set out the frequency of visits to the building, the security that needs to be in place, and any other sort of measures to protect the asset.
Yeah, the main reason just for mentioning it is obviously I serve at Canterbury, and we've had a lot of major shops in Canterbury that have gone, and that caused a magnitude of problems with vagrants, rough sleepers, criminal damage, antisocial behaviour. All of that will come into the mix, I'm sure. But if we hit it in the right context and we have the right people there, we have our security, that sort of thing, looking after it, then obviously we should mitigate that to a minimum. So that was just the reason for mentioning it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all those comments and points, members. Simple question from a simple guy. So TDC, let's say, has wrestled the lease back under its control and it owns the freehold. Broadly speaking, it seems to me there are two ways you could rescue this building. You could crowdfund in small chunks, even though for some of the stars who made their careers in that place, a small chunk could be £10,000 or so. And they might be offered a named seat somewhere in the theatre. So you could raise a fair bit of money from stars of the past and present and so on to people who have an interest in doing that. An alternative route would be to find a sugar daddy, someone like, good grief, his name just got him. The Theatre Hall. He shut the Theatre Hall in Drury Lane for almost 2 years in order to fully gut and refurbish that building. This is a man, he writes some musicals, his name's Andrew Lloyd Webber. Thank you very much. Andrew Lloyd Webber. A £20 million investment in a building like that to him would be small change. Is the council at any point, do you think, you don't have to answer tonight, but is there any mileage in the council seeking a serious investor, someone who loves the theatre, who loves performance, and if you've seen what he's just done to Drury Lane, and he did it with his pocket change really, because he could afford to close it and keep a lot of the staff close by. I realise they're very simplistic ideas, either small amounts of funding or a huge funding from someone who would require a bigger slice of the pie afterwards, of course. But is that anywhere in the council's thinking, instead of doing the building piecemeal, shut it, gut it, rebuild it?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And that certainly wasn't a simple question, but don't worry. I completely agree. What I would say is that we're keeping all options open. So I think that's really important. I don't think it's a good idea for us to restrict any possibilities for funding, crowdfunding, or anything else for the future of the Winter Gardens. I think the idea of a named seat and plaques is a great idea. I think it'd be great if the Mayor of Margate had a name plaque. Well, you know, I mean, the Mayor of Margate could pay for a gold seat, Chair, if they wanted to. But anyway, on the question of sugar daddies, I don't know as many as you do, Chair, I'm afraid. You know, Councillor Tomlinson might be one, I don't know. Sadly, he's not mine. But no, we're looking at all options, and we're happy to try and do that, and particularly if there is a great theatre, great of the theatre and entertainment, would like to come along and help support it in that way. I mean, that would be wonderful, really, because I think, as Councillor Tomlinson said, we've had so many great people come and perform here, not just in years gone by, but recently as well. You know, I've been there for many gigs and many shows and comedians, and you know, I'm sure that, you know, hopefully we can build up a bit of a consensus and a group of well-known names that want to help us bring this building into the 21st century and it have a long-term future.
Thank you very much. Were there any specific proposals that any of the members wanted to bring? I think there's been an agreement already that we can be given more of this detail in writing. And the other thing I mentioned was the possibility of regular updates for the public through the information press releases and things. If we can work along that, I'm sure it will go some way to helping councillors to answer members of the public who come with questions if they feel it's all gone a bit quiet. But thank you very, very much. Thank you for calling that in. Thank you very, very much for coming and speaking to us on this subject. It clearly interests a great number of people, and so thank you for all of that. I don't know whether you would like to leave now or stay for the rest of the meeting. It's entirely up to you. We can take a moment's break while you pack up and go if you like. Yes, thank you very much indeed. Agenda item, the next agenda item then is the budget monitoring report. It's the third report for 21-22. Mr. Blundell, please.
Thank you, Chair. During my time here, this is the first time that we brought budget monitoring to overview and scrutiny. I think it's an important thing for the committee or the panel to consider in order to improve the overall level of financial awareness of members in the authority and for the purposes, as Councillor Huxley was saying, for us to demonstrate sort of transparency of our financial position. So this report went to Cabinet back in March, sets out our Q3 positions, so 3/4 of the way through the current financial year, of our financial position on both the General Fund revenue budgets, General Fund capital, and the same for the HRA. So the overall headlines from this report, if you look at table 1, just below section 1.4, it will show you there's just shy of a £2 million overspend forecast for our general fund revenue spending for this financial year. We are now beyond the end of the financial year, but my team are working away to close the 21-22 financial accounts. We'll probably have sort of indicative figures for that in a month's time and hopefully be able to report something to Cabinet in June, because obviously there is quite an involved process to actually close the financial accounts. So this gives us, as of December, where we think or where we thought we were going to land. So we see a £2 million overspend. Beyond that, in section 2, there's a breakdown, and I'll just whittle through some of the key items there. So you'll see the first one is housing needs. That's largely temporary accommodation of £444,000 overspend. It's worth noting that this has been considered and accommodated in the 22-23 budget. So we put an additional £400,000 into the budget for next year. So that should contain that budget overspend to a certain extent. Obviously, it still remains to be seen how the cost of living crisis will play out next year, and that remains a risk for us, and certainly the amount of expenditure we will face in terms of temporary accommodation. Moving further on, we'll see there's some income shortfalls within property, building control and land charges that have been there for some time. 50,000 within building control has been recognised in the 22-23 budget. There's also action that's been taken within the property estate to start rent reviews and the like to try and increase rental levels there. Some of the other key overspends we've already heard about your leisure previously. The £160,000 there relates to some of the pressures they've been facing as a result of COVID. That's also been reflected in next year's budget as part of the growth, additional resources we put into it. You'll see additional audit fees of £37,000. That's in relation to additional charges from Grant Thornton in relation to the work they were doing on the statutory recommendations. Other key overspends or income shortfalls, so domestic waste collection. So within Gavin's area, there's been a requirement to run 2 additional waste collection rounds that have been manned by or resourced by agency staff in order to keep the service running during the pandemic, and those 2 additional rounds have now been incorporated into next year's budget as well as permanent growth into the budget. So that overspend should be accommodated in next year's budget. You'll see income shortfalls within the Port and Harbour area. Again, that's largely COVID related. And then crematorium income is forecast to be down as well. We were actually up last year, which was one of the obviously the unwelcome from a service perspective aspects of the pandemic, but it did bring in more income due to higher death rates. But we've seen a reduction this year in the amount of income that the crematorium has brought in. There's then some items that don't have actual financial figures attached to them in relation to council tax and business rates because they don't get charged to the council taxpayer in year. But you'll see within the text that business rates in particular is a real risk for us, will probably be down by the region of about £500,000. We'll be using our equalisation reserves to fund that at year end. Similarly on council tax, we're usually positive that we can recover council tax, but there's obviously not been a huge amount of collection activity or debt recovery activity, and because of the pandemic we've not been using bailiffs and the like to the same extent as we would do in usual times, so our debts and arrears have increased compared to normal times. So looking at it in the rounds, £2 million overspend, we should be able to fund that from £1 million worth of the COVID reserves that we held back last year. So you may remember at September, try and get my years right, September 21, I think it was, we allocated £3 million worth of reserves for COVID-related pressures. There's still £1 million of that still available, so we'll use that this year. And we also got £1 million worth of emergency funding in this year related to COVID. So that largely covers our forecast gap. Obviously it is a forecast and things could change depending what happens with the actual year-end position, but that's it looks manageable, the year-end position at the moment of time. Moving on to section 5, the general fund capital programme. It's looking like it's going to be underspent by about £35 million, which is huge. Sounds like a huge figure. That is largely due to us adding the Margate levelling up and Ramsgate levelling up funds to the capital programme in full. So you see there's about £25 million of that forecast underspend is just related to those two schemes. And as we've got better information on the phasing of those schemes, the money will be slipped into later years. So it's really just a timing issue. We're not expecting to underspend against those projects. Actual project aside from those, the main schemes in our capital programme that look like underspending are public toilet refurbishment and office accommodations of £750,000 and £3 million respectively. Both of those schemes are underpinned by us actually selling related assets. So in order for us to spend money on public toilet refurbishment, that was sort of predicated on us actually selling existing public toilets to generate capital receipts to invest in the ones that were left over. We've not disposed sufficient number of toilets, well, there have not been any such disposals, and therefore no capital receipts, and therefore no spends, which is why that is in that position. Very similarly, office accommodation, plans to spend money on our office accommodation, a potential move is linked to selling this site, this building that we're in now. Obviously we've not sold it, so we're still here, and therefore there's been no significant spend against that project. Looking at the housing revenue account, this is largely on budget. So there's a very small underspend well, relatively small underspend of £250,000, albeit it's worth noting that that is against the budget. So the budget is to have a deficit of £2 million. So we will be just having a smaller deficit. So when I say we are underspending, what that really means is we've just got a smaller deficit. And similarly on the capital programme, it is looking like it's going to be underspent. So only about half the budget been spent by the end of December. That is a big improvement, actually. It's worth noting on where we were when the service was provided by East Kent Housing. I think there's been a number of legacy issues that have been adopted by the tenant and leaseholder service that they're having to work their way through that. And the biggest area that we're looking at is the tower block works, but obviously that's a long-term programme that will, similar to the Margate Town deal, those projects will just be slipped and phased forward. It's not that those projects won't go forward. So that's just the summary I wanted to bring to ONS tonight and happy to take any questions on the content of the report or otherwise.
Thank you very much, Chris. Members? Yes, Councillor Huxley.
Thanks, Chris. Item 7.4, sorry, wait a minute. Amounts of 650,000, 368,000 are budgeted for Margate intervention and acquisition programmes. These budgets are currently soon to be spent by the 31st of March, but are dependent on suitable sites coming onto the market for purchase. We've had lots of discussions in East Cliff and Central Harbour about empty plots of land and empty properties that TDC could take over. We had a site visit with Bob Porter a couple of months ago. So is that somewhere that we could spend that money in Ramsgate? Thank you.
I'm not too sure, I'm afraid, Councillor Huxley. I wouldn't want to give you a definitive answer. I would expect the Margate intervention monies are ring-fenced just for expenditure in Margate, but the other acquisition programmes, I can't see why they could not be, because they're just linked to bringing in additional stock into our housing revenue account. So, but I can get a definitive answer from Mr. Porter on that one.
I'll just come back on that because obviously the particularly in Margate the house prices have gone up. It's one of the highest nationally, but in Ramsgate it's not quite as high. So Bob Porter was saying that it's probably better that TDC invests the money in Ramsgate because you'll get more for your money, as it were. Okay, thanks.
And the Coastal Waste Scrutiny Review Working Party has concluded the investigations for the work that this panel assigned them, and I'm going to call on Councillor Fellows to present his findings, but first, Councillor Bailey, did you want to speak before Councillor Fellows presents or afterwards? Which would you prefer? Perhaps we'll hear from you first then, Councillor Bailey.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Really, I just wanted to speak in general support of this report. I actually thought the report itself was really clear and comprehensive, and I feel it could be held up as a model for future scrutinies. So that's really good. As a ward councillor of a very popular coastal area, Viking Bay, this area has particular significance to me and especially to my residents, and I welcome the recommendations. And while reluctantly acknowledging the resource and logistical limitations of the brief, I do feel that recommendations could even go further. The waste collection service, more than anything, needs to be flexible, proactive and well manned. The British weather, as we know, is very unpredictable, and an unexpectedly warm day could bring swarms of people to our coastline, even out of season, resulting in us being caught out with unfortunate residual waste. And while the message to take your rubbish home may hit home with some responsible visitors, many do not behave that way and expect the provision of bins. Seasons are becoming more extended, it seems, and we now see many more visitors than we used to in the spring and autumn. So maybe there needs to be a re-evaluation of timings and expectations and resourcing to reflect that as well. Self-monitoring bins sound great, but only if we have the resources to deal with them quickly and effectively. And my concern with these is that it may be a bit of a piecemeal collection, which may not be cost effective if you're going to pick one bin up from one area and one from another. One of our main problems, as I understand it, is the accumulated waste left overnight, which blights our otherwise scenic area. This waste is then subject to all the elements and wildlife scattering it all around, causing environmental problems and causing even more work for the crews who come to clear up in the morning. My understanding is that this problem is due to the waste transfer station at Hurstone being closed early in the evening, so we can't get rid of that last lot of rubbish. So what we can do about that, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is maybe to have an allocated overnight holding area somewhere. What I really would like to applaud, though, is the recognition of our valuable volunteer litter pickers and the emphasis on working together with the council. Other authorities like Dover do celebrate their local environment heroes, and I feel this will go a long way towards showing our appreciation. And further to this, I would like to suggest that the council provides dedicated litter bags for volunteers, maybe in a different colour from the usual Thanet council bags, with volunteer litter pick clearly emblazoned on them. This would identify the litter pickers as being volunteers and would be easily recognisable and quantifiable, maybe, when left out for collection. That's all I want to say, but I really thought the report was very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey. I'm sure you've already touched on then some of the things that Councillor Fellows is going to bring to us. But if I can hand over to you now then, please, Councillor Fellows, to share your report with us.
Thank you, Chair. At the meeting on 26th of August 2021, the panel set up a 5-member Coastal Waste Review Working Party to conduct a scrutiny review of the coastal waste collection practices in our district. To review the topic, the review topic was picked out of a list of topics that were identified by the panel, and the list forms part of an overview and scrutiny panel work programme. The working party was given specific terms of reference, which was as follows. A, to review how the council ensures that its promenades and beaches are kept clear of rubbish and litter, and make any recommendations that the panel feel will improve the service. And B, to review the current replacement waste and dog poo bin process at Thanet District Council, and make any recommendations that the panel feel will improve that service. The committee should all have had a copy of the review sent to them with this evening's agenda, and I hope you've all had a chance to read it, or will read it in due course. We have conducted a thorough review of coastal waste and have come up with 20 recommendations. The recommendations are all listed in the review and include such things as promoting Thanet as a plastic-free district, more integrated working with town and parish councils, and more appreciation of our volunteer groups and litter pickers, plus many more. It's been a really interesting exercise to get an insight into the mammoth task and efforts that the council staff and many volunteers undertake to keep our coastal areas clean and tidy year after year, and keeping it attractive for both our local residents and visitors to our district. I'd like to add my thanks to the working group members, Councillor Tomlinson, Councillor Rattigan, Councillor Keenan, Councillor Austin. It was a real cross-party effort. And I'd also like to send my thanks to Nick and Charles, who facilitated the review and all the meetings that we had. I'm sure we all found it very interesting, albeit a little bit challenging through the Omicron wave to organise everything virtually. I think we're quite proud of the document, and I sincerely hope that the recommendations we have made can successfully be implemented. And I look forward to working with the council officers and cabinet members to see that they are, but only time will tell. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fellows. It is really, it bears repeating, it is really well set out, so it's fairly simple to follow the recommendations that the panel, and on behalf of the whole committee, I'd like to thank the panel as well for the efforts that have been put in. I'd only just like to touch, most of it is self-explanatory what you mentioned there, but I would like to mention it was really good to read about the evidence you gained from town and parish councils, because it's one of the areas. There have been a number of other areas discussed at various town councils. I know we have at Ramsgate discussed ways in which the councils can cooperate and work together better, and certainly it would seem the litter on the streets, keeping the place in which we live clean and tidy, using volunteers as well as others to do that it was good that you gathered that information as part of the work that you were doing. Thank you very much for that. Members, do you have any comments or questions you'd like to make of Councillor Fellows? Yes, Councillor Curry, please.
First of all, thanks to members and officers for the scrutiny review. It's very interesting. Lots of good recommendations. I can't really pick out any that I don't agree with. 20 recommendations. Whether we can implement all of them is another matter, but certainly if we can implement most of them, it would really be a big improvement. Particularly like the idea about liaising with volunteer groups. Really important. They do such a great, fantastic job, and there's some good ideas in here. I particularly like number 6, TDC should consider approaching voluntary litter groups first when recruiting extra seasonal staff. I think this is a great idea and really shows our appreciation, and there are some incredibly hard-working volunteers. I suppose the most challenging recommendation would probably be a plastic-free regime. I imagine that would be a great idea, but very challenging to put into motion. Yeah, thanks very much.
Yes, please do.
Yeah, I mean, volunteer groups. I mean, yeah, they're an untapped workforce. We had them here. We had, I can't even remember. There was about 20 of them came here, and they do feel underappreciated. They said nobody from TDC ever contacts them and says thank you to them on a regular basis. They go out day after day, just picking that up off their own backs. Nobody asks them to do it. They're untapped workforce. So if we can appreciate them in some way, even giving them a seasonal job, someone, people that go out and do it for nothing and end up getting a paid job, I think would be a great thing. And the plastic-free thing, I think, if you only go down any harbour or you see the pubs dishing out beer in plastic cups, I mean, if we can stop that, it's just any small thing that we can recommend and we can work with businesses to do can make a big difference. So.
Councillor Austin.
Councillor Moore, is it not right that Broadstairs is planning a plastic-free Broadstairs? Did I hear that from somewhere?
Yes, that is correct.
Can I ask how far you got with it?
You'd have to speak to Councillor Garner because he's heading that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's an amazing report. Congratulations. A lot of work's gone into it. Just on the fly tipping reporting form on the TDC website, it's very clunky and long-winded. And there's no similar form for reporting litter. So we're trying to get our residents to report fly tipping, litter and everything. Is there some way that we can make it easier to use? You talk in your report about an app. and the Fix My Street. But I think in some ways, yes, Fix My Street, but also I think TDC, the website, and that should be updated. I think that's something actually that the communications team are going to look into. So I don't know if that's something you could add to the report or as a comment or, sorry, and then just one other thing, but it's a really good idea about the getting rid of takeaway polystyrene cups and boxes and chip packets and things. But how do we actually, Chair, deliver that? I'm not sure if you can do it as a bylaw. I think they're sort of out of date. Licensing, I'm not sure if you can do that with cafes and places that actually already have a license, unless you're going to do it as a Thanet-wide thing. How is that going to be delivered? I know it's just saying other places have done this, have implemented this idea. So, but is the PSPO legislation, is that one way that you can do it? Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Wade, please.
Yes, I would say in terms, excuse me, in terms of the app, and this is a conversation I've had today actually, is we did have an app that wasn't being supported. We weren't aware it wasn't being supported at the time, and people were using it, and we had several hundred people using the app, but it hadn't been supported. And the decision was made by the digital team that they wanted to move to a different platform, and we've moved to that platform, and that obviously needs some work, because really it was the opportunity to report that online and then to go through our digital system and then come out. We've got the in-cab technology. We're just fitting all the technology to all the supervisors' vans, so they'll get real-time information, which should link back into those back office functions. So we should see that improvement. In terms of shops selling packaging, cardboard, the chip packets rather than paper, and plastic cups, I'm not aware that there's anything we can use specifically. It's about buyer power, isn't it? If people putting that pressure on those companies and also ourselves, and one of the issues we have, and you'll be well aware, is where the waste is when somebody goes into a chip shop and buys a big box, and then obviously walks out into the street and then just fills all the street litter bins with these big boxes, which actually aren't really that contaminated, are they? Can probably be reused if you just put a sleeve in them. And these are the conversations that we've had with some of the larger fish and chip shops. It's just that commitment and like I said, that pressure, and really trying to. It's sort of an embarrassment factor, isn't it? Is them making a commitment. I think one of the things we can consider is a pledge. And I know lots of other coastal towns do it, where you do a pledge to our environmental credentials, and actually you start putting stickers in shops that we're committed to that pledge, and that's quite an effective tool that I've used previously. So it's something we can look at. I would say in terms of volunteers, I think personally is we do a lot of work with volunteers, and we've had some of the forums go in, and we provide a lot of support in terms of equipment to volunteers across the whole of the district. And I think in terms of this report, I accept the recommendations. I think we're happy to take some of these recommendations on. Some of the recommendations we've done previously, and I'm happy to explore them again. But in terms of one of the things I think is missing from this report is the work that the Thanet Coastal Project do, because obviously Tony does a lot of work with community groups, and lots of those community groups, he has up to 500 volunteers across the whole of the summer season doing a range of activities across the coastline, including litter picking as well. But I think it's important. I think in terms of the way we're working, the positive for us, and you'll know that I've been saying we've got a transition, and part of that transition is we're bringing in multifunctional teams. So we've got these 5 environmental operatives. We're just in the process of recruiting another 7, so we'll have 12 environmental operatives, and this is a new way of working for us. So these are the guys that are trained on all the equipment we've got, and we've been using them effectively, doing deep cleans, going into areas where we've got problems. When we do the walkabouts, we're going to start doing that, because I know we haven't done a walkabout of everybody. It's going to take a while for us to do it, but we're doing it with ward councillors, and then bringing in some members of those teams to actually do that activity. And it's a very effective tool, because these guys are integrated into the cleansing or park services. They stand alone, so it just gives us that additional capacity. But I think it's a good report, and I'm happy to take those recommendations. I think we just need to formulate it into more of a structured action plan, where obviously yourselves can then monitor us against some of that performance.
Councillor Austin.
It's great to hear that you accept the recommendations, Gavin, and I think an action plan will be a sensible way to follow this up. I think the things that we felt as a working party were that the most crucial recommendations were the first two, which is obviously prioritise this in the budget, which isn't, which I'm sure you'd be supporting us on, but something else has to go unless we can raise more funds or unless we can raise more resource. And the other recommendations are mostly about how we might get the rest of that resource, whether it's working better with town and parish councils, whether it's working better with volunteers, whether it's stopping litter at source, as some councils already do, etc. So there's a whole series of other things. And the business about the app, the last recommendation, the Fix My Street app, I've gone down the street on my way to a meeting, reporting something on the Fix My Street app on my phone as I went. I cannot do that with the Thanet Council website by any stretch of the imagination. And everybody we spoke to, the town and parish councils, the volunteers, everybody all went, please can we have Fix My Street back? It worked so brilliantly, we were so happy with it, it was so easy to use. They're the people who are committed to doing that reporting, which is doing part of our job for us. So I really strongly recommend that we reconsider that app. Thanks.
Sorry, I left the mic on. Councillor Fellows, then, thank you again very much for that. I wonder if, given that it is so well laid out, Mr. Hughes is going to come to us in a moment and give us an idea of what happens next in terms of the comments from Mr. Waite. But could I ask you then to propose that the report is given to Council and perhaps another member of your working party to second the proposal? Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, sorry.
Thank you very much. It's a great report. Thank you very much. Members, are we agreed that we pass this on for the next stage and we'll hear from Mr. Hughes then on what happens next? Are we agreed? Thank you very much. Mr. Hughes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to clarify the process that the report's now going to go through, and reflecting the points that Gavin made, which is that obviously now that the panel has accepted the report and recommended it on to Cabinet, Cabinet will now look at the report and consider each of the 20 recommendations, and they will then agree or disagree with those recommendations and adopt some or all of those recommendations. And it's at that point that, as Gavin said, is at that point we create the action plan based on the recommendations that have been agreed, and then the panel can then look at the agreed action plan from Cabinet and monitor that, as opposed to monitoring the entire report. Because again, as I say, at the moment, they're just recommendations. It's up to Cabinet as to which ones of those they want to actually take on board.
Yes, Mum.
At the risk of saying the same again, I think it's important that we stress that the recommendations, some of them are interdependent. So we suggest this because you could get the resource from there. So is there a way that we can stress that to Cabinet without, and we're not saying you have to accept them all or not, but on the other hand, we do have suggestions as to how resource might be found. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's probably best by Councillor Fellows coming along to the cabinet meeting when it's presented, and obviously if members then want to speak under 20.1 at that cabinet meeting, they can do so and make those points.
mentioned, isn't it?
So, thank you, Chairman. So just, we have had a suggestion from the Chief Executive as a potential scrutiny topic, and that is the how to improve and maximise the relationships between town and parish councils and the council. So we will be putting that together and putting it through the scoring index, and that will be ready for the next council meet, the next overview and scrutiny meeting, which is it's in May, isn't it, Charles? Yeah. Yep, in May. And obviously, if members can then choose a new topic, because obviously by that point, hopefully, Cabinet will have considered the coastal waste one, so we'll be in a position to start the next scrutiny review, and members can obviously choose, depending upon what the score is, to bump that one up and do that one next, or if there's another topic in there that members wish to pursue, then we can look at that one as well. So.
Thank you, and that's one of the things that in particular we mentioned at Ramsgate a week or so ago, how we can input into that if it becomes a topic for review and scrutiny. There is, of course, an outstanding report. Sorry.
Just a plea that obviously Margate doesn't have a town or parish council, so can we not be left out and the charter trustees be included? Thank you.
There is, of course, an outstanding report. When I say outstanding, I mean it hasn't been presented yet. Not so bold as to call it outstanding, but the one on the blue plaques, monuments, street names, and so on. We really have been, from a personal point of view, it was something I was looking at with the group. We've been waiting for a further statement since January the 27th, 2021, which was the last time the government spoke on the matter, to indicate that any changes would need to go through due planning processes where they were appropriate and so on. I am happy to report that just the other day, the Minister Michael Gove issued another short statement. So rather than me sit in front of you again next time and say nothing to report, I'm hoping to be able to put something together and then perhaps not only as a scrutiny committee, but as a council, we can make a formal comment and recommendation to Cabinet and then on to Council in the normal way. So it hasn't been forgotten about, the memorials and plaques and street names, but it's just that the government have been rather quiet in the last couple of years. Perhaps they've had some other things to deal with, but we are going to bring that back, or I was going to bring that back as soon as possible. Okay, then that's the next one. Then is the forward plan and exempt cabinet report list. Excuse me. Oh dear. Is there anything in particular the members would like us to consider from this? Are we going to let the natural business of the council have its way, and it will come back to us eventually when the time comes, I'm sure. Okay. Members, then we're asked to note the report. Thank you very much to our officers for supporting us this evening. And that concludes the business at 8:45 for this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel. Thank you for all the contributions.